Variant, standard, title, Part 1, the beginning. She said we should keep it professional. ID, 58302. She said we should keep it professional, but there was nothing professional about the way she looked at me. It started on a Tuesday. The kind of afternoon that hums with stillness, half sunlight, half silence, the air thick with the quiet rhythm of two people pretending not to notice each other. I'd been working there for 3 months, long enough to know her schedule by heart, short enough to still get nervous every time she entered the room. Her name was Evelyn. She moved like someone who had already lived 2 lives, deliberate, self-contained, and impossibly calm. There was a softness to her voice that made people lean in just to catch it. But when she spoke to me, there was something else behind it, something careful, as if she was measuring each word before it left her mouth. She was my mentor, technically. I was supposed to be learning. But every time she leaned over my shoulder, her perfume, faintly citrus, faintly something I couldn't name, made it hard to think about anything that mattered professionally. That afternoon, she called me into her office. The blinds were half closed, slanting sunlight across the floor like broken glass. Her jacket was draped over the back of her chair, and she was sitting with one leg crossed over the other, scrolling through a document on her laptop. I stood there for a second too long before she looked up. "You're quiet today," she said. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes, gray, steady, held me a little too long. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Just focused." She smiled, barely. "Good. Focused is good." Her hand brushed mine when she passed me a folder. It wasn't much, a second, maybe less, but it was enough to throw the air off balance. I could feel my pulse in my wrist, in my throat, in every part of me that didn't know where to look. We talked about reports, deadlines, meaningless things. She asked questions she already knew the answers to, maybe to fill the quiet. I answered too fast, or too softly, I couldn't tell. The conversation staggered like it didn't want to end but didn't know how to go on. She glanced at me again, then away. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something else, but instead, she leaned back and exhaled. "I think you're doing well," she said finally. "Better than most." It was the kind of compliment that could mean anything. Or everything. "Thanks," I said. "That means a lot. Coming from you." There was a flicker then, a tiny shift in her expression, as if the sentence had landed somewhere she hadn't expected. She straightened a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her hand trembling slightly before it stilled. "Don't read too much into it," she said, but her voice had gone softer. Warmer. I smiled, maybe to make it less heavy. "I won't. Promise." But I already had. Outside, a car horn echoed down the street. Inside, the silence grew thick again. She turned toward the window, pretending to check her phone. I pretended to study the document, but my eyes didn't move. When she finally looked back, her gaze caught mine, steady, quiet, unguarded for a fraction of a second. The door handle rattled. Someone knocked twice, sharp and sudden. She blinked, breaking the spell, and her posture straightened instantly. "Come in," she said, her voice firm again, professional, precise. But her hand stayed on the edge of the desk, fingers curled tight, as if holding on to something invisible. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't the only one trying to keep it professional. The knock had been her assistant. A quick exchange about scheduling, a polite smile, and then she was gone, leaving Evelyn and me suspended in a silence that neither of us dared to name. For the next week, things went back to normal. Or at least, that's what it looked like. She still sent emails with clipped sentences and perfect punctuation. Still spoke in that calm, measured way that made you forget she was only human. But I caught her watching me once, through the glass wall of her office, and she looked away a second too late. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. The truth was, I didn't know much about her. People said she'd been divorced for a few years, no kids, too busy, too focused. She rarely talked about herself, except in fragments, a mention of a house by the coast, a father who used to fix watches, a cat she said she didn't have time for anymore. Each detail felt like a puzzle piece she was careful not to let me fit together. Maybe that's why I noticed everything else. The way her laughter changed depending on who she was talking to. How her eyes softened when she was tired but refused to admit it. The faint indentation on her ring finger, a memory she still wore. One evening, we stayed late to finish a presentation. The office was empty except for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint tick of her silver watch. She sat beside me, close enough that her sleeve brushed my arm whenever she reached for the keyboard. "You don't have to stay," she said without looking up. "I know." I tried to sound casual. "But you'd stay if it were me." That earned a small smile. "You think you've figured me out that easily?" "Not easily," I said. "But I'm trying." She looked up then, really looked, and for a moment I thought she might laugh. Instead, her gaze lingered. Her lips parted slightly, as if to say something she shouldn't. The air between us shifted, heavy and still. "You shouldn't," she whispered finally. "Try, I mean." "Why not?" Her hand hovered near mine on the desk, fingers brushing against the edge of my notebook. "Because people talk," she said. "And I'm not someone you should be curious about." I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words stayed trapped behind my teeth. The clock ticked louder. The office light buzzed faintly overhead. She reached for the mouse, her wrist grazing my sleeve. The touch was nothing, accidental maybe, but her breath caught. So did mine. "Evelyn," I started, but she shook her head, standing quickly, as if distance could erase what just happened. "It's late," she said. "Go home." I gathered my things slowly, hoping she'd say something else. She didn't. But as I reached the door, she spoke softly, almost to herself. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Someone I shouldn't have let get close." When I turned, she wasn't looking at me, just the dim reflection of both of us in the glass wall. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of herself. The knock had been her assistant. A quick exchange about scheduling, a polite smile, and then she was gone, leaving Evelyn and me suspended in a silence that neither of us dared to name. For the next week, things went back to normal. Or at least, that's what it looked like. She still sent emails with clipped sentences and perfect punctuation. Still spoke in that calm, measured way that made you forget she was only human. But I caught her watching me once, through the glass wall of her office, and she looked away a second too late. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. The truth was, I didn't know much about her. People said she'd been divorced for a few years, no kids, too busy, too focused. She rarely talked about herself, except in fragments, a mention of a house by the coast, a father who used to fix watches, a cat she said she didn't have time for anymore. Each detail felt like a puzzle piece she was careful not to let me fit together. Maybe that's why I noticed everything else. The way her laughter changed depending on who she was talking to. How her eyes softened when she was tired but refused to admit it. The faint indentation on her ring finger, a memory she still wore. One evening, we stayed late to finish a presentation. The office was empty except for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint tick of her silver watch. She sat beside me, close enough that her sleeve brushed my arm whenever she reached for the keyboard. "You don't have to stay," she said without looking up. "I know." I tried to sound casual. "But you'd stay if it were me." That earned a small smile. "You think you've figured me out that easily?" "Not easily," I said. "But I'm trying." She looked up then, really looked, and for a moment I thought she might laugh. Instead, her gaze lingered. Her lips parted slightly, as if to say something she shouldn't. The air between us shifted, heavy and still. "You shouldn't," she whispered finally. "Try, I mean." "Why not?" Her hand hovered near mine on the desk, fingers brushing against the edge of my notebook. "Because people talk," she said. "And I'm not someone you should be curious about." I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words stayed trapped behind my teeth. The clock ticked louder. The office light buzzed faintly overhead. She reached for the mouse, her wrist grazing my sleeve. The touch was nothing, accidental maybe, but her breath caught. So did mine. Evelyn. I started, but she shook her head, standing quickly, as if distance could erase what just happened. It's late, she said. Go home. I gathered my things slowly, hoping she'd say something else. She didn't. But as I reached the door, she spoke softly, almost to herself. You remind me of someone, she said. Someone I shouldn't have let get close. When I turned, she wasn't looking at me, just the dim reflection of both of us in the glass wall. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of herself. The next morning, Evelyn was distant again, polite, efficient, and almost too composed. Whatever had passed between us the night before seemed buried beneath the weight of her professionalism. But it was there, humming beneath every sentence, every accidental glance. We were assigned to work together on a client pitch that week. Long hours, shared coffee, whispered ideas. It should have been routine. It wasn't. By Thursday, we both stopped pretending we didn't notice the other. The silence between us had changed, not empty now, but charged, alive. She'd lean over my desk, her sleeve brushing mine, and I'd forget what I was supposed to say. Sometimes she'd catch me looking, and neither of us would look away fast enough. Late that evening, the office lights dimmed to their automatic nighttime glow. Only the two of us remained, her standing by the printer, me gathering papers that didn't need gathering. The low hum of machines filled the space where our thoughts should have been. Can you hand me that report? She asked, her voice softer than usual. I turned, too close. Our hands met halfway, fingers brushing over the same page. The air tightened. She froze, eyes flicking to mine. I felt the warmth of her skin, the faint tremor in her fingertips, and something inside me shifted, the kind of shift you can't undo. Then her phone buzzed on the desk. We both startled. She reached for it first, snatching it up as if it had caught us doing something forbidden. A name flashed across the screen, Daniel. Her jaw tightened before she silenced it. Everything okay? I asked carefully. She hesitated. An old friend, she said. But her voice betrayed her. It's nothing. The lie sat between us, delicate and heavy. She turned away, pretending to read the report, but her shoulders gave her away, too rigid, too still. I stepped closer. Not enough to touch her, just close enough that I could smell the faint citrus of her perfume again. She exhaled slowly, the sound trembling at the edge of control. This is wrong, she whispered, still facing the window. You know that, right? Probably, I said. But I don't want to stop. Her reflection in the glass showed her eyes closing for a heartbeat, her hand tightening around the paper she held. When she turned to face me, we were inches apart. The dim office light framed her face, the soft lines at the corners of her mouth, the flicker of hesitation that wasn't quite fear. For a moment neither of us moved. My hand rose halfway, a reflex I couldn't stop, but I caught myself before touching her. She didn't step back. Her breath brushed my chin when she spoke. Don't, she said quietly. Please. It wasn't an order. It was a plea. I nodded, lowering my hand. She exhaled again, shaky this time, then turned toward her desk as if that single movement might rebuild all the walls we'd already broken. But when she gathered her things, her hand lingered on my arm, barely a second, a touch that felt accidental only because it had to. Her thumb moved once, a silent apology, or maybe a confession. We didn't say goodbye that night. We didn't need to. The silence had already said too much. And when I left the office, I caught her reflection still standing there, watching me go, her face hidden behind the glass, her hand pressed faintly against it. By the next week, the air between us felt almost unbearable. Every interaction had the weight of something unspoken, every glance, every pause stretched longer than it should. She was trying to pull away. I could feel it. But the harder she tried, the closer we seemed to fall back together. It happened on a Friday evening, after another late meeting that ran long and quiet. Everyone had already left. The city outside was dark, streaked with rain against the windows. Evelyn sat at her desk, typing an email she wasn't really reading. I lingered by the door, pretending to check my phone. She finally looked up. "You're still here?" I nodded. "You look tired." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "That's generous. I'm exhausted." There was a pause, the kind that hangs like static between two people who have run out of ways to lie to themselves. I stepped closer, just enough that the reflection of us in the glass looked like one figure instead of two. "Evelyn," I said quietly, "you don't have to keep pretending." Her jaw tightened. "Pretending what?" "That you don't feel it too." For a moment, she didn't breathe. Her fingers tightened around her pen before setting it down with care. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "Not to me. I already did." She stood, slow and deliberate. The distance between us dissolved as she moved closer. I could see the pulse at her throat, the faint sheen of rain on her coat from earlier, the way her hair fell loose from its clip. When she spoke again, her voice was low, not angry, but trembling on something fragile. "You're too young to know what you're asking for." "Then tell me." Her eyes lifted to mine, full of something that wasn't just fear. "It's not about you," she said. "It's about me. About how this looks. About how easy it would be to forget everything I've spent years building just because you." She stopped, her breath catching mid-sentence. I took one more step. "Because I what?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at me the way someone looks at the edge of a fire, knowing it will burn, but still unable to turn away. I reached up, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. My fingers grazed her cheek, and she closed her eyes, just once, like surrender. The sound of rain filled the silence, steady and slow. When she opened her eyes again, something had broken loose inside her. She took a single step closer, her hand rising to rest against my chest. Her palm was warm, trembling slightly. "This can't happen," she said, but her body didn't move away. "I know," I whispered. For a heartbeat, everything stopped, her breath against my neck, my hand hovering at her waist, both of us caught between wanting and restraint. The space between us felt thinner than air. Then the door clicked open. A voice called her name, distant, unsuspecting. We sprang apart. She turned toward the noise, but her hand was still clutching my sleeve, her knuckles white. And just before she let go, she whispered it, so soft I almost missed it. "I can't keep fighting this. Variant, standard, title, Part 6, the climax, the choice. ID, 58307. That night, the storm came back. Heavy rain drummed against the office windows, smearing the city lights into streaks of silver. Most people had gone home early, but not us. Not her. Not me. Evelyn stood by the window, arms folded, the faint glow from the street lamps tracing the shape of her shoulders. I stood at the doorway, soaked from the short walk in, every nerve telling me to turn back. I didn't. "You shouldn't be here," she said, not turning. "I know." Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "You don't make this easy. Neither do you." That made her turn. Her expression wasn't anger, it was exhaustion, the kind that comes from fighting the same feeling too long. "I can't keep running circles around you," she said quietly. "Every time I think I've built a wall, you find the door." I took a few slow steps toward her. "Then maybe stop building it." She exhaled, shaking her head. "You're 26. And you're 44. That's not the problem." "Then what is?" She looked at me then, really looked, and the silence that followed was the kind that hurt to breathe in. I could see her weighing it, the years, the risk, the guilt, the way her pulse jumped at the sound of my voice. "I'll lose control," she said finally. "Maybe that's what control looks like." For a moment neither of us moved. The rain softened outside, and I could hear her breathing, uneven, quiet, close. When I reached out, my hand hovered near her face but didn't touch. She didn't flinch. Her eyes flicked down, then up again. "You don't understand what this means," she whispered. If we cross this line. I stepped closer until our foreheads nearly touched. Then we stop pretending we haven't already. Her breath hitched. My hand brushed her jaw, my thumb tracing the edge of her cheekbone. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch before catching herself, fingers rising to press against my chest, halting but not pushing away. Evelyn, I said, voice low. Just tell me to leave. She didn't. She opened her eyes instead, and what I saw there wasn't fear anymore. It was recognition, the quiet kind that said she'd been feeling this far longer than she'd ever admit. Her hand slid down, resting against mine. The space between us vanished. Then don't leave, she whispered. The words hung in the air like a thread about to snap. I could feel every heartbeat between us, her perfume mixing with the scent of rain, her breath warm against my skin. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't perfect, it was human, messy, real. We didn't kiss, not yet. We just stayed there, suspended in the choice we both already made, her hand in mine, her forehead against mine, the storm quieting outside as if the world had finally exhaled. In that stillness, I understood, it was never about what was allowed. It was about what was real. And for the first time, either of us looked away. Variant, standard, title, Part 7, the conclusion, what remains. ID, 58308. The next morning, the rain was gone. The air smelled clean, almost new, the streets outside washed to quiet silver. Evelyn was already in the office when I arrived, her window opened just enough to let in the sound of the city waking up. She looked up when I entered, no mask this time, no polite distance. Just her, tired but lighter somehow. I didn't think you'd come in, she said. I couldn't stay away, I admitted, setting my bag down. Besides, we still have that report to finish. A faint smile touched her lips. Always the professional. The tease landed gently now, not as a wall but as an echo of where we'd started. For a while, we worked side by side in easy silence. The kind that didn't need words to feel right. When she reached for a folder, her hand brushed mine, accidental, maybe, but she didn't move it away this time. I was scared, she said finally. Not just of what people might say. Of wanting something that could fall apart. I turned toward her. Everything falls apart eventually. But some things are worth the risk. She looked at me then, really looked, and something softened in her eyes. The defenses, the hesitation, the guilt. All of it fell away. I spent so long convincing myself I was too old for this, she whispered. Too old to start feeling everything again. I stepped closer, my hand finding hers. You're not too old for anything. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The sunlight caught her hair, and I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, familiar now, grounding. She exhaled, steady this time. I don't know what happens next, she said. Neither do I answered. But we'll figure it out. She smiled then, not the small, careful smile she gave everyone else, but something real. She reached up, fingertips brushing my jaw, her touch slow, unhurried. Come here, she murmured. When I did, she leaned into me, her forehead resting against mine, our hands still intertwined. There was no rush, no tension left to break, just warmth, and the quiet understanding that we'd already chosen this. Outside, a gust of wind carried the last traces of rain across the window. The city noise faded to a hum. She let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. Maybe keeping it professional was never the problem, she said softly. Maybe pretending we could was. I laughed quietly, my thumb tracing the back of her hand. So what are we now? She tilted her head, eyes searching mine. Something honest. And in that moment, standing too close, the morning light wrapping around us, it was enough. Not perfect. Not simple. Just real. We stayed like that a while longer, her hand still in mine, her heartbeat steady against my chest. The world outside kept moving, but for once neither of us did. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?